Welcome to Hidden Voices, the podcast series which explores the less heard voices in health and social care. I'm Sharon and I work for Healthwatch Essex. It's our job to make sure that people's experiences help to improve health and social care services. In this episode, we're talking to Heidi about her experiences of living with ADHD. Heidi, hello.
Hi Sharon, how you doing?
I'm fine, thank you. Thank you for joining us today.
No problem.
So, your journey with ADHD started a few years ago now, but you were actually identified and diagnosed not late in life, but later perhaps than many would assume.
Yeah, basically I've been a police officer for 25 years. Had always had certain challenges in life, but I just thought that's the way I was. And then about 2.5 years ago, things came to a head and I was asked to go and see the force medical officer.
What sort of challenges had you had?
I've always found that throughout life that justice has always been a big thing to me, and it wouldn't matter, if it was something that affected me directly or otherwise. I always felt I had to fight if someone, was being bullied or being given a hard time. Even if I didn't know that person, I would feel so strongly about it that I'd have to get myself involved. And sometimes that's not appropriate to do that. I never really had a filter. So whilst I wouldn't mean to be rude or too direct, sometimes either my expressions or the things I said would come out as antagonistic. And because I'm quite quick-minded, I wouldn't always be able to measure myself enough to say it in the right way. And that could cause conflict. And obviously in a world like policing, where you've got a rank structure, if I wasn't able, perhaps if I was, really involved in something very focused, my filter, I don't have a filter at all, on my face would say something completely different to what, I should be saying. Perhaps I was saying the right thing, but in the wrong way. And obviously that can be quite a challenge to other people around you and how they perceive you. So it would come across sometimes as being, bombastic, antagonistic, perhaps a bit challenging. So I never did anything wrong as such, never did anything, unlawful or that was against, police regulations. But sometimes maybe I could have done better.
And presumably that had been since childhood.
Yeah, that is the way I've always been. But I just thought the way I was strong-minded, strong personality. It's just one of those things. But certainly within the policing environment, obviously because there is a rank structure, you've got to do what you're told, within reason. And I always found that good supervisors would understand that in me almost, and they would see everyone within their team brought different skills, so they would be able to manage that. But sometimes the less understanding supervisor would see me as just being challenging, and then obviously that could affect our relationships working together and could damage them. It must have been hard for the supervisors to deal with me because now we're not really getting on, but the job still needs to be done. So things had come to a head. I'd been off sick for a little while and I'd had a breakdown. And
would you say that breakdown was because of those issues around the
ADHD?
Yeah,
definitely. I had one about 18 years ago, and that was all work related again, just taking on too much and overstretching myself and taking things to heart too much, and just the typical ADHD way, really, overthinking. So that was quite a big change in my life. And I think when you go through something like a full mental breakdown like that, you never, in my view, you never fully recover, but you learn a lot. So I knew the signs that I could look out for. I know when I'm getting stressed because I will present in a different way and I can feel it. So this had happened again about 2.5 years ago, and I was referred quite rightly to the force medical officer, and I went to see him. And I'd never met him before, although I'd had quite a lot of support from occupational health, and work had been pretty good with counselling and supporting me. And I went in and I sat with the doctor. He just checked my name, and the first thing he said to me was, "My dear, have you ever heard of ADHD?"
And that was just based on
the report. He hadn't
asked
me anything. Just confirm my name to make sure I was the right person.
But previously throughout your life, nobody had ever mentioned that. You hadn't thought of it yourself?
No, it hadn't even crossed my mind. Obviously, I knew what ADHD, I knew a little bit about what it was and other, neurodiverse conditions, but I didn't really know an awful lot about it.
So your response to him presumably was no?
Well, I just remember thinking, is he winding me up? So I sort of chuckled. I said, "Don't be silly, I'm 52, why are you asking me that?" And then I looked at it and he said, what do you mean? And I said, well, no one's ever mentioned ADHD to me. Why? What's going on? And I was totally confused. And he was very serious in his face. And suddenly realised, hang on a minute, he's not joking. Mm-hmm. So I said, okay, so you think I might have ADHD? He said, yes. But you can't be diagnosed with ADHD unless a psychiatrist has to do it. Luckily for me, the force medical officer, one of the things he'd done earlier in life in his training was all about neurodiverse conditions. So he was very, very knowledgeable about this area. And just through the things that had been written about me, and then just literally meeting me in those 2 or 3 minutes, he obviously could see certain signs in me.
And that in itself was quite lucky, because many people wouldn't have found themselves
indeed
with someone so knowledgeable.
Exactly, I was really lucky, and to this day I will still believe that man changed my life, and I'm really grateful for that. It was a bit of a shock at the time, but I'd seen so many different counsellors over the years, medical people, and it had never shown.
And presumably over this time you'd risen through the ranks in the force?
I'm still a constable. I've always been a constable. I personally didn't ever want to go for promotion, but I've done, whilst it doesn't give you a higher rank, I've done lots of specialisms like family liaison and things like that. So I've gone on and been productive.
So you'd still progressed your career, your personal life?
Yeah. Still managed to, get to where I want to, which is part of the message that I like to try and put out now. You can have a neurodiverse condition. You will have to work harder to get to where you want to be. But if you're prepared to put the work in, I do believe we can get to where we want to be. And actually, I've gone on to do more than I thought I would ever do. And whilst, I'm not a super millionaire running my own business, that's not all what I wanted anyway. So you can achieve, and nothing should hold you back. It's going to be hard work, because we have to work a lot harder than neurotypical people. But you can get there, especially if you've got the right people around you.
And at this point, the right person had come into your life and suggested ADHD. Yeah.
He asked me if I would do a screening test. So I said, yeah, definitely. Because now I'm thinking, wow, my first thought was, I'm going to lose my job. I've got 25 years service, 30 was what, we aimed for at that stage. It's all changed now, but it was. It's too early for me to go. This is going to affect our whole future. As much as I had a lot to say about certain roles within policing, it's something I wanted to continue to do. And I just...
You thought your career was over.
Yeah, and that was the biggest panic. So I didn't sit there crying like a baby, but I did cry, and he said to me, why are you crying? And I just said to the doctor, if I'd known this 52 years ago, how much easier life could have been. Because some of the choices I would have made, perhaps I'd have made them differently. Perhaps things would have been easier. Perhaps I would have tried to do things in a different manner.
And that's the power of just having that diagnosis, isn't it?
Yeah, and this is just within minutes of being told, and then I realised all the things that have been hard, the challenges at work, the challenges within friendships and relationships, could all have been, if I'd understood, I could have perhaps been different. So I did the screening test and I scored very highly, and he asked me, would you go and see a psychiatrist? Wow, this is getting in deep pretty quick. What happens if she says I was worried about being told I was bipolar, or was I going to be psychotic? Was I, I was like, yes, whatever.
The fear of the unknown, which is completely natural.
Yeah. So I went and I saw a lovely doctor at the Priory. I took my sister, because I like you to take somebody that's known you, so they could say a little bit about you and how you present.
So this was a private diagnosis route, just to be clear.
Yeah, that was a private diagnosis route. I could have gone through the NHS. I did look into that, but at that stage there was between, depending where you live, a 4 and a 7 year wait. Of course, at the age of 52, I'm thinking I've only got another 5 years working. Didn't want to wait 4 to 7 years.
Not that 52 is old.
Oh, no, of course
just
not.
going to
Most
put
definitely.
that in there.
Yeah.
As a woman of a very similar age.
And it's difficult, Also, there are other things that can affect, like the menopause. So I'm conscious, that I'm likely to be menopausal. And that would obviously, it's a hormones issue again.
It has a big impact.
Yeah. So, become quite aware of certain things and how they can affect you. So I didn't feel I had years to wait. There's no point in being diagnosed after I've retired, and my friends are my friends, hopefully they'll stick around, but work, I didn't want to continue to be a challenge. So I went to see a doctor, had about an hour and a half to chat with her. She asked me all sorts of things, very informal, very kindly chat. Obviously she asked certain questions of my sister about how I was when I was younger, about how I presented now. Things like people pleasing came out, that I would always try and do what other people needed before myself.
There's a lot of different facets to ADHD. I think automatically people think of that hypermotivation, hyperactivity, but that's just one part of it, isn't it?
It's quite a complex condition, and you don't realise that. I think when you mention ADHD, people just think of like 9-year-old boys in the park, perhaps being a little bit, overbearing, and boisterous, and I think that's still a little bit how society sees it. But obviously it can be so much more than that, and it can affect literally everything that you do. And it does. Complex. It is very complex, and I think if people don't understand that, and there is a lot said about it now over recent years, we are working quite hard, society, but then you get people saying, oh, haven't we all got that? There's so many more people have been diagnosed now, but that's because work like yourselves are doing, all the stuff that you do, and other people, you're raising awareness of it, so people are, I wonder if my son or my partner has got that, because it's more available now. I don't think it's necessarily
any more prolific. It's just the awareness.
It is.
Of it.
I mean, when in the 70s when I was at school, it wasn't even a thing. It wasn't recognised until the year about 2000, I think it was, that the NHS actually recognised the condition. So of course by then, I was 30 years old. So of course, even when you get diagnosed as an adult though, if it's not for places like Health Watch, there is nobody to fight your corner for you. It's you guys that are raising awareness, signposting people. If it wasn't for the likes of you guys, people don't have anywhere to turn. Because obviously it's not for Essex Police to pay for me to be, more stable and for my medication. Yet, as an employer, they're quite good at recognising different conditions and trying to make things, reasonable adjustments and more support. We've got support networks, things like that. But it's not down to them to manage it. It's down to me to be able to perform. But society itself, it helps if they can accept you. But basically, people like myself are having to come to charities in order to get where we need to be. I'm not so sure that's the right balance, really. It shouldn't all be on charities to carry people through. The government should be doing what we need. It's a condition, it's a neurological condition, that affects the transmitters in your brain. It's not something you choose to have. So I got diagnosed that day. Dr. Grant said, she actually said you're a barn door case. And I said, well, what does that mean? She said, big and wide open. You very clearly got ADHD.
Is that a technical term, do you think?
Yeah, I think, to be honest, it was such a lovely session with her, a lovely appointment. There was no pressure at all. She made me feel really comfortable. The questions she was asking were obviously quite difficult sometimes, but at no stage did I not want to tell her. She was very open.
That's so important in getting the diagnosis right.
It was, because it meant I could open up to her and tell her, as it was. And also I said to her, please tell me anything I need to do. A bit like when I met you today. Just tell me, what you want to know, and I'll do it the best I can. Because I'm quite happy for people to be open and honest with me, so that I can try and help raise awareness and everything. So she said, do you want to go down the medication route? Well, I'd already made the decision. I'd done a little bit of research in the week, to my appointment, being a little bit selfish. The research had shown that there is a medication called Elvance, which works well for people like me, but also one of the downsides was that it could help you lose weight because it would suppress the appetite.
That's the selfish part.
So the selfish part of me thought, right, we'll have a little bit of that. That would be very handy, please.
Well, if it's a byproduct, for you to argue.
Exactly, and clearly I need, to lose some weight. So I thought, fantastic, can I have that one, please? We actually started off on Concerta, which was her advice, which is fine. Yeah. And you go through a period of what's called titration, which is where you try different medicines to see how they affect you, because we're all different. We're all affected in different ways, and I got a couple of other medical conditions, polycystic ovaries, things like that need to be considered.
There's a little bit of trial and error, isn't there, to get the right blend.
Exactly, and we're all different, so what might work for me might not work, for the next person. So 4 weeks on that, no change whatsoever, no negative side effects, like headaches or upset tummies, anything like that, but also no positives either. It didn't feel any more stable. So through her help, we tried the Elvance. The first couple of doses didn't really make any difference, 30 and the 40. The 50 milligrams, I definitely felt like I was able to concentrate more, a bit more settled. And the 70 milligrams, which is the maximum you can take in Elvance, is where I settled. And I can now use hyperfocus. Especially if I'm interested in something, I could sit for 3 days and work on a project, not think about eating, which for me is very unusual, or, stopping. So I've got to be a bit careful with that, because I can actually make myself poorly if I'm not sleeping properly.
Managing your superpower there.
Exactly. So you've got to be a bit, I have done that once where I just put too much in and burnt myself out. But that's down to me to manage that, and try and be sensible.
But again, it's a big learning curve for you. You can't expect to get everything right the first time. None of us can. This
is it. And it's through listening, other people might say, actually, I think you've done too much now. And it's about, whereas before I've gone against whatever anyone said, now I think, well, that could be a thing. You need to listen. You need to take on board what people are trying to tell you. But it's so handy, especially if it's something that I'm passionate about, like neurodiversity or the role that I'm doing at the moment. Because when I do get to sit down, I can really, really concentrate for hours and hours and get a lot done. Whereas before, pre-meds, I was just a nightmare. I probably only worked 2 or 3 hours productively a day, because I would get myself over-involved in everyone else's business. And I remember at work, I got moved. I used to have it was a big open plan office, about 15 of us in there. And I used to have a desk that overlooked, it's a ballroom, and it overlooked like a grassy area, and there was a cherry tree there, and there was like little rabbits and things like that. And sometimes I just find myself while I'm trying to concentrate, looking out the window. And it worked very well for me. I didn't know that at the time. And then there was a change around, and I got made to sit by the main door. And because of the work that we were doing was quite sensitive, you had to have a tag to get into the office. So obviously if people didn't have a tag, they couldn't get in. But they could see through the window, and the only person they could see is me.
So you were constantly disturbed.
So I was constantly disturbed, which of course I didn't realise at the time. And ultimately I didn't know I had ADHD. How could anyone else know that? So there's no fault on them, on the organisation, because I didn't know. But now putting 2 and 2 together, I could see just how disruptive that was for me. Because I would answer the door, somebody wants to see the sergeant, okay, walk them through, would you like a cup of tea? Make them a cup of tea, and then involve myself in some way, a conversation that's been had or whatever. And it would take me 45 minutes to work my way back to my desk, to sit down, to get on with it again.
Or for someone else to knock.
For somebody else to knock, exactly. So whereas other people, typical people were able to answer the door, he's through there. He'll see you. I couldn't do that. So production-wise, I wasn't doing half as much as I should have been. I see that now.
But having that diagnosis, getting that medication that made the difference for you, essentially turned all of those things that were once a weakness, as you would have perceived it, into a strength.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I did as soon as I got diagnosed, I referred myself to Access to Work, the government scheme. Didn't really know anything about it, but I thought, well, I've heard a little bit about it, I'll register for that. And there was about a 6-month wait, but I registered for it, and they're very good. They get in contact with you, can we make an appointment? And I had an hour-long interview with a specialist in neurodiversity. So the lady, I don't think she had ADHD herself, but that's obviously the environment she worked in. So she was really good, and everything I was saying to her, she'd obviously heard before, from other people. So she knew where I was coming from a lot of it, so I didn't have to go into too much detail. She advised that I get some noise cancelling headphones, and for me that wasn't going to work, because in my brain all the time I thought this was how we all were, because obviously I didn't know till later on that I was different. I feel like I've got 18 radios all playing at, I don't know, number 5, but I'm trying to listen to one of them. So I've got 18 radio stations, all different, all chattering away, and that is how my brain feels all the time, but I'm trying to listen to number 5, say, and listen to what they're talking about. So working to block out everybody else and concentrate on that one is actually really hard work for me. And I just thought we're all like that, and the concentration was like that for everybody. But obviously my learning now, I know that's not normal. So noise cancelling headphones for me weren't going to do me any favours, because I could hear all 18 different channels again. So what I tended to do, I didn't know, I'd been doing it for 4 or 5 years. I would take my iPhone earpiece and I would just listen to music, but not music I particularly liked. So it might be classical or something like that, which is nice, but I couldn't sing along to, and I didn't need to worry about it. It was just like white noise. And I didn't realise I've been doing that for a few years, but that's obviously why. So
we
I could
find our own
down
coping mechanisms.
exactly. And now when I look back, I can see why I did certain things. It's quite interesting, very interesting condition. And all that did was like play down the other 17 radio channels, and I could concentrate on the one I was trying to listen to, if that makes sense. So I said to her, could I have ones that will play music or whatever? So she wrote up a report. I went to ask for them from work, and they said, no, you can't, because there might be a security risk. Okay. What you're working on, can be tapped into and things. So I went to IT, and actually they were really, really helpful. They said, of course we can get you a special one that does this. They were very knowledgeable, and that's where it helps, and it going to the right people.
Absolutely.
And they paid a small fortune for these headphones for me, which really do help. But I also needed them to be Bluetooth, because what I would do, if I took my own iPod earphones out and leave them on the desk to go, I don't know, to make a cup of tea, or to go to the printer, or to open the door, it would break my concentration to such an extent. Whereas if I could leave them on, then I wouldn't stop and talk to people on the way to the printer. It wouldn't take me 45 minutes again to sit down. Or making a cup of tea, I could just go out, make it, because I've still got my earphones in, not get involved in other people's.
You wouldn't be making
business.
A tea for everyone and having an individual chat with everyone in the office.
And obviously, I might be having a break now to make a cup of tea, but they might not be. They might be in the middle of something. So the last thing they want is Heidi whittering on a load of rubbish 15 minutes. So not only am I disrupting my own work, I could be disrupting everyone else's as well. So these headphones that I could keep on, and basically just said to people, look, when I've got them on, if you need me, no problem, give us a shout. But if I've got them on and you don't need to talk to me at that minute, it's probably better for us both, if I keep them on. So just little twists like that, that you can make, little adjustments. It works for everybody, not just me.
And communicating with everybody.
Yeah.
And understanding. It's just made a huge difference.
It really did. I remember there was a female officer that I worked with who I thought I got on very well with. She's the same sort of age as me, maybe a couple of years younger. And I remember one day she accused me of being oversensitive. So you're oversensitive about everything. And it really upset me. I really took that to heart, because again, that is a typical ADHD trait. Rejection, sensitivity is a big thing. And I know that now. So I probably was coming across as oversensitive. And again, I didn't know it was the ADHD in me, so how could she know? But that will always stay with me. That was somebody I thought I could trust, and that was a friend of mine. But she made it very clear, and in other ways too, that there was no like for me, and that's really hard. Because nobody wants to be disliked, do they?
No.
So I'm very open about it now, because I think it's hard for other people to manage me sometimes. And if I'm having a bad day and being really forgetful every day, and being really forgetful, I'm always late for anything. And like my family now, they know if I say 9 o'clock, it's probably going to be near at 9:30. And it's not that I'm being ignorant or that I don't care enough to make the effort to be on time. It's that something will distract me, even if it's just walking out the house, and I just can't manage my own time. That can be really hard for other people, because they think, that you're being disrespectful to them. They don't, if you arrange to meet somebody for a coffee or whatever, or for an appointment, you should be on time. You should be early, really, shouldn't you? But I've just never, ever achieved that. Even though I could get up at 5 o'clock for a 9 o'clock in the morning appointment, I'll still be late.
Still wouldn't be there.
Because unfortunately I've been diverted, and I'll be, I don't know, tidying the understairs cupboard, or think I've got time to run the Hoover over, when I really haven't. So time blindness is a big thing for me.
So it wasn't just your career, your workplace, that things were being affected. There were challenges in other areas of life as well.
Yeah, it affects everything, because it's the person that you are, definitely. I mean, like, in some ways that's quite good, because I would always fight for others to get the best that they can. And, if you're a friend of mine in need, I would imagine, hopefully, I could really maybe step up and help you, and I would really put myself out. Having said that, I probably did that to the detriment of other people too. So like my husband or my family, if I'm dropping everything at 2 o'clock in the morning to run to my friend in need, that is going to have an effect, at home, which must have been quite frustrating for them.
And that's that hyper focus on the issue.
Yes.
And not seeing the bigger picture.
Exactly. We can solve this, we can do this, we can work on this. And also, often, I was a federation rep for a while and would act, for people, but I wasn't very good at enabling them to do their own thing. Sometimes you've got to take control of your own situation, haven't you? And someone might say to you, well, I think you should do this, that and the other, look into this, but I would take it on myself.
You would rescue rather than empower.
Exactly. And that's not actually a productive way to be. You need to try and, sometimes it's good to rescue, but when they're strong enough, people need to learn how to deal with things themselves. Exactly. And you give them the tools to do that, don't you? Especially if you're really busy and you've got 20 people like this and a job to do and a home to run and relationships to uphold, you can't do it all. But I wouldn't recognise that then. I just think it was only me that could possibly sort it out. And I think I've calmed down with that a little bit. Now I try and support where need to, stand up and speak where need to, but empower other people to be the best they can be within themselves with that support, which is probably the more healthy way for everyone.
Which is great, yeah.
Yeah, but it's working that out, isn't it?
It is. It takes time, as you say. You had the titration period with the medication, that got right. And since then, things you clearly feel have generally been going well, getting better.
Yeah, I think it took about 7 months to settle down completely. And during that time, I think there was a bit of grieving, after the diagnosis and that. Not grieving because I always thought I was perfect, nothing like that, but grieving because life could have been a lot easier. My life choices that I'd made could have been so much better. I remember about 10 years ago now, my role changed slightly and I was on the serious collision investigation team. So we dealt with all the people that died on the roads in Essex. They would come into our office. Quite a complex role, especially if there's a prosecution, that we were looking at, taking someone to court for it. Very important role, very interesting. But the titration period, I finished after the 7 months. Had my little grieving process moment within that, recognising things. And then from about the last 2 years, things have just slotted into place. It was quite obvious that I needed to change role. At first I wouldn't listen to anyone pre-diagnosis, that perhaps it wasn't the right place for me to be, the right environment, and perhaps I needed a bit more support than was going to be made available to me. But I eventually decided to ask for another role, and Essex Police supported me in that. Floated around doing various different projects for a little while and working on different areas. And it's quite difficult within policing because at the end of the day, there's an organisational need, like with every organisation. We've got to produce the goods, we provide a service. That's right,
it's an emergency service.
Yeah, so you can't just be sitting doing things you want to do.
Yeah.
Exactly, there's a job to be done. And I was very lucky in a superintendent who I had worked with years and years before said, I've got a vacancy on my team, Heidi can come and work with me. So they approached me and said, would you consider going on the positive action team? And up until now, I'd never been known for my positivity. But obviously I'm well medicated now. And I thought at first they were taking the mickey. Positive action team? Me? You're joking. And a lot of my colleagues find that hilarious now. And it has been life-changing for me because the team I work within, we're only a small team, but everyone gets me. I try and be open and honest about it. I have a sergeant who I was very concerned that I might cause problems, and wind him up. So he was actually on leave when I started with the team, but he phoned me before we went and he said, look, I'll see you in 2 weeks. Just introduce yourself to everyone, get to see what everyone's doing. I was like, yeah, but what work do you want me to do? And he's like, that's what I want you to do. Find your feet, find out what sort of thing, throw yourself into what other people are doing. Where are you going to fit in? Yeah, but what work do you want me to do? No, you're not listening. Just take a chill pill. I understand. I told him about my ADHD and that, and I've given him a wellness document, which is a really good tip, actually. Remind me to mention that to you. And he went on holiday to Spain with his family, and he came back and he phoned me and he said, right, I've researched it all while I've been on holiday. I know what you need. I've got your back. You're going to be fine. And I just burst into tears, like I do, because it's for the first time in my life, I needed someone to take that step for me, to find out what I needed and almost take my hand and do it themselves without me having to explain it all. He'd obviously taken the time, to do this for me. That meant a lot. And then obviously I met him in person and I knew everyone that I was working with, and people have just been so understanding, caring. They don't know everything about the condition and sometimes have to explain, but they want to help me, and I haven't been in that environment.
And they don't necessarily have to know everything.
No.
It's knowing enough.
It is.
Communicating, isn't it?
That's it. Or recognising that today I might seem a bit more manic. What's the matter? I'm speaking. Often I know if I'm going to go into a crisis because I'll speak really fast. I swear more, potty mouth. And it's all stress and the anxiety. It's quite easy to see in me.
And is this where the wellness document comes in?
Yeah.
Okay.
I get very hypervigilant. Well spotted, Sharon. I'm impressed. You see, I would have forgotten about that by now. Yeah. One of the things I had been told about by occupational health was this wellness document where it's your document and you write about your condition. What do you want to share? So you don't have to if you don't want to, but for me it was a big thing. Because what I found was this supervisor, by the time I got to know him and him know me, I would always say to them, look, I'll never do anything on purpose to wind you up. That's not my way. But my way can sometimes be a bit abrupt. Again, this is pre-diagnosis. I didn't know why I was doing it. And I would always say to them, please don't ever think I'll be offensive to you on a personal level, but sometimes I can be a bit blustery and all this. And, oh, yes, I understand. But then when it actually happened, they wouldn't remember the conversation that we'd had. Yeah. But for me, I had tried to explain how I can be. Not that that's an excuse for poor behaviour, it's not. But if I was going to be that way, I was trying to
substantiate.
Yeah, it's not an excuse, but it was a reason. So this wellness document, you could say at the top, so mine would say something, I want to tell you about how I'm affected by the menopause and ADHD. And so there'd be a little box you put in, how does it affect me? So it will affect my concentration, the workload that I can get. What can I do to help you? How will I recognise it in you? So I was able to say to them, you will notice that I'm swearing more in general conversation. You will notice that I'm speaking.
Handy tips, isn't it?
It really is. Just so they might think, oh, this is something she's raised. Maybe
it's your instruction manual.
Yeah, and it was really helpful. Obviously, I didn't need to share it with everybody, but to be honest, I did with mine because I always think, how can you expect people to support you if they don't know?
But that was your choice. And
yeah, my choice.
What
didn't have to. Yeah, so that was my way. Doesn't work for everyone. And then it would say something like, what can I do then if I see this happening in you? So the best thing to do is not to confront me head on in front of loads of people, because you'll get probably, especially if I am in a crisis, a lot of attitude back. And as a sergeant, if I'm giving attitude to a sergeant, it's not good to undermine them, is it? Because you're making the supervisor, you put him in a position where he's got to perhaps deal with you, or it's awkward. So I'd say, please just take me aside, try and understand how I'm feeling. I now know, obviously, that executive function is an issue for neurodiverse people. And it is a known fact that we only work at about 70% executive function to a neurotypical person. So if we're all given 10 jobs each, I am only likely to be able to cope with 7 of those. Now that, again, is not an excuse to be lazy and have a lesser workload, but it is something that's important for my supervisors to know, because if I am in crisis, that could be a problem for me. And in the past, I wasn't able to express that. And I never got in trouble for not being very good with my paperwork or for losing cases or anything like that, luckily, but it would mean I had to work that 30% harder to keep up, which would then make me more tired, more grumpy, more hypervigilant. It would be like a vicious circle.
It's about equity, isn't it?
It is. It's just about settling. Whereas now, my lovely sergeant, he will always say to me, is there anything I can take off of you? But more importantly, I've always said to my supervisors over, say, the last 10, 15 years, if I ask you for more work, please listen to me. It's because I feel I've got the capability to do more. If I ask you or say to you that I'm struggling a bit, please hear that too. Because if I'm at the stage where I'm saying that to you, it means I've recognised it, that I'm not keeping up, and I need you to be proactive in helping me with that. It doesn't mean to say I'm stupid or I'm incompetent.
It's self-awareness, isn't it?
It is.
And helping others to be aware of it.
It is. And luckily, my new team, they're just fantastic. And they'll often say, can we give you a hand, even though it's nothing, they've got their own workloads and that. And generally, I manage absolutely fine. But little things like, because I'm enjoying the role so much now, right peg, right hole, I say, it's a less on the policing side. It's all about trying to level the playing field for people in different ways, be that culturally, gender-wise, disability-wise. We're really lucky. Essex Police have a chief inspector, a sergeant, and myself, and we try and just keep the level playing field for everybody. Again, it's about empowering, isn't it, and supporting.
Equality and diversity.
It is.
Absolutely key.
And that's what I deal with on a daily basis. So for me, this position and my superintendent allowing me to come on the team couldn't have come at a better time, followed by the force medical officer, initially by him recognising the condition, me getting the support, and now walking into a role like this. So I'm 2 years nearly into this role, and I still feel like I've won the lottery.
So things sound incredibly positive, and also socially at home things are better.
Socially, I think one of the things I was able to do, which is quite big for me, I think, there are some people I felt in life that I had a very one-sided relationship with, and that perhaps it was all about me doing for them and me supporting them. What was I getting out of it? And I've been lucky enough to recognise that and perhaps manage those relationships better and concentrate on the people, you know, that would do for me.
More of a balanced
more
relationship.
of a balance, exactly, which I think is more healthy for all of us. I now recognise I'm great, you know, I'm okay if it's like we go out with another couple or a couple of friends, great. But social situations where there's going to be like 50 of us in a, you know, maybe it's a retirement do or something like that, I find that really difficult to deal with.
A bit of overload.
Yeah, very, very overwhelming. And I didn't realise why. But I'm quite sociable, you know, if you want to go out, you know, on a smaller basis, that's great. I'll do that all day, every day. So I recognise that a little bit more now. I think I try and be a little bit more aware, like with my poor husband. It's our 25th wedding anniversary on Thursday, and I think, how has he managed 25 years? Or maybe it's the other way around, who knows? How have I managed
giving each other a medal,
exactly.
That'll be the fair thing to do.
Yeah. But I try now, if I'm going to be a bit neurodiverse, I can tell now when I'm doing it, and I try and think, right, stop. You know, and he is now able to say, a couple of times he said to me, have you taken your meds today? He can tell the difference between me taking them and not taking them. Hence one of the reasons why I suppose we're talking now, for these recent changes that have really come hard. So I've had a fantastic 2 years where I feel I've got my life under control. I'm so much more productive. I'm able to help people in a better, more productive
Everyone's
way.
benefiting.
I think so.
From this simple change, you and those around you, and those that you're working with and for.
It's just been life changing for me personally, and like you say, I'm just so much more efficient for everybody else, which makes it nicer for everyone else to be in it.
It sounds like a really happy ending to the story, doesn't it?
It's been fantastic this last 2 years, and I now realise that, you know, how good life can be, so much more productive, and I like that.
And you like yourself a lot more.
I think so. There's bits I would definitely change. But now maybe I realise I can't, you know, and there are some bits I have to accept, you know, accept that they are going to be weaknesses, and that's fine, isn't it? Because
we all have strengths and weaknesses. It would be a strange day if we didn't. So that all sounds really positive, but recently you've been thrown a bit of a curveball, haven't you?
Yeah, sadly, and not just me, unfortunately, it's going to affect everyone in England. It's gone down the pathway that I did for the diagnosis. So basically, when you finish your titration, obviously, it cost me about £3,000 to go through the titration period because I didn't go through the NHS. So I settled on the medication just over 2 years ago, and the psychiatrist wrote to the GP and said to them, I had a wonderful GP, would you take Heidi on a shared care agreement, which I believe is basically, I would still pay and see the psychiatrist for my reviews every 6 months, and she would check on my well-being and, you know, how I was performing, and because it's quite a strong medication that you take, so they've got to check that you're well enough to take it. And then she would write to the GP and say, yeah, please carry on prescribing Heidi with the 70 milligrams of Elvance, and I would get the prescription like you would any prescription from the doctor, take it, pay your £9.90 or whatever the fee is, and off I would go.
And that's commonplace across most GPs. This shared care agreement is how most people get their medication for ADHD. It's just prescribed as anything else would be, an asthma inhaler, diabetic medication.
Exactly, like my HRT stuff, and all the other medicine.
And that's been ticking over as pretty much the norm.
Yeah, and it was working really well. You only get 28 days worth of supply because it's a controlled drug.
Yes. So
they're not going to give you months and months, quite rightly. So again, that was a little bit of a challenge for someone with ADHD to be timely in reordering. But that's fine.
Nothing that can't be worked.
Exactly, you know, with your alarms and other ways of coping. But it was working really, really well. And then in January, I got a letter from the surgery explaining that they were no longer going to carry on the medication after the 31st of March. That there'd been discussions and funding wasn't there to support people like myself, and they couldn't guarantee that I'd been diagnosed properly because I hadn't been diagnosed through the NHS. This is initially how the letter was worded. So basically what they were saying is, how do we know that you've been to somebody bona fide? And basically we haven't got the time to check up and review you, so we're not going to bother anymore.
And this isn't uncommon, your situation, because many people, having realised the waiting time going through the NHS pathway for diagnosis, not because they could easily afford the private route, may have taken out loans or borrowed money or, you know, whatever from certain situations to be able to fund that, just to get the diagnosis. And also many people may have been in different situations at diagnosis point, may have been in different jobs that they're now not in, earning less.
Yeah, exactly.
Circumstances changed. So for many, it's something that they did at the time to get that diagnosis.
Yeah, because, you know, you might have been a parent and have a teenager that you know is coming up to their exams, really important time in life in the next 2 or 3 years. You can't wait for years for your child to get the support you can see as a parent that they need. And as you know, most parents I know, through sheer desperation for their child, you know, would get a loan if they needed to, take their child for diagnosis. But because they've gone out with the NHS, certain school establishments and indeed the NHS themselves wouldn't recognise it because it's not somebody within the NHS. So these poor parents will have paid out thousands of pounds and then be left struggling now like I am. For instance, when I did mine, it did cost the £3,000. I put it on a credit card. I was in a situation where, because of my work, I could, you know, afford to pay that back. There
was a lot of pressure and desperation.
I was desperate.
From you to get the diagnosis. You didn't feel that you could wait.
That's exactly it. I needed to be this better person. I needed to get the help that I needed to be better. I was in the fortunate position where I could borrow the money, but there may be people that aren't as fortunate as me. What are they expected to do? So you've got all these people who've invested in what they thought was the right thing for their loved one at the time, and now you've got the NHS turning around. It's not actually the NHS. It's quite complicated, and it goes into, you know, different boards that sit in NHS England and things like that. It's not a very simple.
It's a convoluted process as how this come about, but a lot of people are now receiving letters across Essex, different areas,
across England,
receiving letters from their GP surgery saying that they're basically now opting out of these shared care agreements.
Yes.
And therefore your surgery won't be issuing you prescriptions for the ADHD medication anymore.
That's exactly it. And what they're saying in the letters and all the literature that I've been reading, it's worded in such a way by NHS England that as the patient you will be repatriated back to your original diagnoser. Like they're doing you some kind of service, they're repatriating you back to where you came from.
But the implication is that you will now have to pay private prescription fees if you're repatriated back to the Priory, which isn't sustainable, presumably.
Yeah, it's not. Obviously, I can only talk for the way I went. So I have to pay twice a year to see the psychiatrist, who is fantastic, and she's very, very. I'm lucky. She's very, very aware of how, expensive these things are. But ultimately, she's done the training. She's qualified. You know, she should be paid what she is due to be paid. It's not for her to carry holes within the NHS or the system itself. More importantly, what costs the money is it's costing me about £200 a month straight just to get 28 days worth of medicine. So obviously you have to pay to be reviewed, you get your private prescription, and you have to pay for the actual medication. Now there can be lots of problems with that because sometimes the medication is not very available, so that can change the prices. I suppose it's like anything, isn't it? If something's in demand, the price will go up, and you might not be able to get it at Boots for £5, £7 a piece, a tablet. So you've got to go to a more expensive pharmacist, so you end up paying nearly double. So I think over the year, I'm looking at between £300 and £500 a month, all in, with all my checks that I have to get done, all my appointments, prescriptions, and the medicine. Now that's a lot of money.
That's an extra £300 to £500 per month, just to maintain what you have now. Yeah,
just to maintain the good 2 years. Yeah, which means I'm staying at. I haven't had one day off sick. I haven't needed to during those 2 years. I'm so much more productive than I've ever been. Of course, if I'm not off sick, which I've never had a bad sick record, but I have had mental breakdowns. Well, I've not had anything like that in those 2 years, which means I'm at work, providing a service not just to the public, but to my colleagues in the organisation, paying my taxes, you know, whereas before I didn't expect to get past 27 years service. That's what I was always aiming for. But now I'm actually wanting to finish to 30. I want to do my full 30-year service, which I'm not saying I'm the best thing since sliced bread and, you know, I'm the only officer in Essex. Of course I'm not saying that, but I am trained in certain things and have certain skills, which means I'll stay longer, hopefully.
That's public service that you want to do, which is valuable.
It is valuable, you know, and hopefully if I do it well, you know, people benefit from that. But if you stop my medication, I know I haven't taken it properly now for 10 days. I've only got 4 tablets left.
Why are you not taking it properly now, Heidi?
Because they stopped issuing it to me on the 31st of March. So you don't. It's a medication you don't have to take every day if you don't feel you need to. So if I know I'm going to be working or I'm going to be with people that I've got to watch my P's and Q's with and try and be the best I can be filter-wise, I'll make sure I take one of my tablets. This morning I had 4 left. I knew I was coming to see you and that I need to concentrate. So I chose to take one this morning so that I can perform to my best. But what that means is, going forward now, I've got 3 tablets left. And I'm going to be in situations, I know I am, in the next couple of weeks, you know, giving evidence at certain things, representing people, where I've got to be on the ball. So I've got to take and save those tablets for then, because I'm not going to get any more until I can afford to pay for them. And this is the problem. I was able to save.
And this is the problem that many people across the county and the country are going to be in.
This is it. You know, it's not. We're all affected differently, and I'm very lucky. Maybe I'm not affected so badly as some people are, but a lot of people that will be affected by this will be hard-working people who, you know, have families to run, homes to run, good jobs, you know, that are perhaps, you know, public facing. I'm sure there are nurses, I'm sure there'll be doctors that are neurodiverse, you know, and are going to have challenges in this way. We've all got skills to bring, and surely it's about keeping all of us working in society, paying our taxes, working with the community, giving the best we can in whatever way that may be.
Making a difference.
Yeah, making a difference. Surely it's better that we're all able to produce the best we can, rather than knowing that we're taking a step backwards, and I'm finding that really, really hard.
What are your fears now? You must be feeling quite anxious.
Yeah, it is making me anxious about everything, really. Anxious that I'm not going to be able to perform the best that I can. Am I going to keep on my workload? I know that my filter will slip, so am I going to say the wrong thing to the wrong person? That person could be in crisis and struggling. Because what I find with the meds is they just give me that split second. If someone's saying something I don't want to hear, or they're going to ask me to do a job that, you know, isn't perhaps the best job in the world that I want to do, often my face will give the game away, and my expressions. Or it might be that I'm being told something negative, or that someone's being particularly awkward and they're perhaps not doing, you know, to try and help themselves. And rather than just blurting out, look, you know, you need to help yourself here, with the medication, I got that split second to say, behave. And it's a split second, but it's enough for me to check myself. Whereas I'm going to lose that filter now. And I would never wish to upset anyone. I'm in such a supportive role now where I try and help people. I need to be able to do that tactfully. And it worries me that I might not be as tactful as I can be with the meds. Or, you know, or achieve as much. You know, like I've got a lot of good ideas, or what I think are good ideas, you know, that I want to push forward. But if I'm not able to sit down and develop them and concentrate on them and focus on them, they're not going to get done. Just simple things, but they can make big differences to other people's lives. I worry that it'll affect my relationship with my husband, because if I'm being more argumentative and challenging, it can't be very nice for him, can it? It's hard. I don't want to lose friendships through it. I've had a taste, you know, a 2-year taste of how good things can be, and I am being selfish. I don't want to lose that. I want to be a good person. I want to achieve everything I don't
think it's selfish at all. And there are going to be many people we know through people contacting us through our information and guidance service that a significant amount of people are receiving similar letters to this,
Mm-hmm.
and it's causing fear, it's causing uncertainty.
Yeah.
And for many people with, different sort of co-diagnoses with the ADHD, often the letters themselves aren't completely clear, the pathway forward isn't clear. So there's a lot being generated there around fear, panic in some situations, about where do I go from here, what does this all mean?
That was exactly how I felt, and I consider myself to be reasonably intelligent enough to be able to, manage most things. Policing for 27 years gives you certain skills. But when I got the letter, I didn't understand half the letter. It kept going on about primary care and secondary care. But obviously I've not worked within the NHS environment, so I don't really understand.
To most people that wouldn't mean a great deal.
Exactly. What is primary care? What is secondary? Who am I? And they were saying things like, we're going to repatriate you back to your secondary care provider. Is that my GP?
It's not user-friendly language.
Exactly. You're not explaining anything productively here. And the letter was very much about, we're doing it to protect you because we don't know that you've been diagnosed properly. But having dug a little bit deeper and done my research now, ADHD UK is a good charity that tries to help, and they have challenged various different things. And it worked out that NHS England were having a review for the whole of the month of February, and ADHD UK got onto this, and NHS England were not review. They were reviewing the spending in every area, not just for ADHD, which is fair enough. There's a limited budget, isn't there? You can't all have what everybody wants.
We all have to work to budgets.
Exactly. So this is obviously something they do regularly, but they wouldn't hear from outside charities like yourselves. They wouldn't hear from patients that might be affected by it. It was just from within, which is not really a very balanced review.
We always advocate for lived experience being the most powerful resource.
Exactly. And you can understand, why cuts need to be made and funding is affected, but you've got to do it in a fair way. So in the end, we were able to write to various different people. I've written to my MP. Sadly, after 2 months, I've still not had a reply, or to my chaser email. I have written to the ICB, to the LMC, I think it is, and various different, to the GP themselves. I've written to various different people trying to get help, written to the health minister, just to try and raise awareness. And in the beginning, back in January, a lot of MPs didn't have any idea. I can tell by social media, a lot of people have had responses from their MPs, and a lot of the MPs didn't have any idea that this was even being thought about. Eventually, we were allowed to write to NHS England and express our concerns, which we did. There was about 12,000 people in England that wrote within the space of a week.
But even that, I think, is a small number, because most people receiving this letter aren't going to know what to do. There isn't one clear pathway.
Exactly.
So people are siphoning off into different routes, or not feeling that they can challenge it, not feeling that they can say anything. So just
exactly. They might not realise that. Yeah, and I think I was probably one of the first to get the letters, because when I was putting it on social media, a lot of people were like, what is this? And I had to explain it. So I think people, even up to this week, are still getting the letters, and I think they're legally bound to give you 3 months' notice. There might be people that are getting a letter today, and they're not going to, they're going to be okay for the next three months. Hopefully, the first lot of us will be able to sort something out. But on that letter, all it says is we'll repatriate you back to your secondary provider, which for me was the private psychiatrist.
And for many, as we said earlier in our conversation, and there are very few of those people that can feasibly look at sustaining the cost that you mentioned, which is standard.
And if you're a desperate parent, how hard is that going to be? Well, for all of us. But, I can't think of anything worse than seeing your child struggle daily in all sorts of ways. That's a big thing to take on. So I went to the GP with the letter straight away, and I spoke to someone on reception who didn't have a clue that this was happening, didn't realise the letters had gone out. Where am I meant to go then? What do I do? If I need to get re-diagnosed, that's fine. How do I go about doing that? And nobody knew anything. I found that really frustrating. They're quite dismissive. Not our problem, we're a GP. Yeah, but you've got the NHS computer and everything in front of you. Can you point me in the right direction? No. So then I did my own research, wrote to everybody, got the usual stuff back, the usual answers, copied from some document, basically about And then it transpired it wasn't just about my care and had I been diagnosed properly, it was more about funding. And then through work about 2 months ago, I joined a seminar, and it was a GP in London was running this seminar, and he was very truthful and very honest, and he was basically explaining about how the funding works and that they get so much per patient per head from the government, if you like, whoever they look after. But once that money's gone, that's what they've been given. So it only takes about 2 times for you to attend your GP surgery for in-person appointments, and the money that the GP has been budgeted for is gone. So if you're somebody that's at the GP every other week, you're massively eating into the budget from everyone else. But obviously some of us can't help that. Most of us can't help that. If we're going to the GP, generally we're going for a reason, aren't we? And the GP can basically, in basic language, claim a top up. So originally they were getting £50 extra for me to have the ADHD support. They'd gone to NHS England a year or 2 ago and said that wasn't enough for the time that they were having to give. And it went up to £150 a year for people like me, for them to manage. But that's still not enough. Now, all my GP has to do, when he's given me the prescription for my other medication, is put on there the Elvance that I need. He has never seen me or spoken to me on the phone with regard to welfare, or reviews or medication changes or heart or blood tests, nothing.
In relation to the ADHD?
In relation to the ADHD at all, because I do that all through the psychiatrist and I pay for it. So to be honest, I'll be totally frank with you, £150 a fair amount of money for writing your name on the bottom of a prescription that you were already writing for the other things I have to get. But we've all been lumped together in one category, and you've not got an NHS diagnosis, go away. So this is where the problems are coming in. I went to see my GP personally, asked him, are you really going to do this? Are you really going to stop giving me the medication? And he said, yeah, unfortunately, they've been told, initially they were given the choice that they could carry on if they wanted to, but now they've been told locally that they've got to stop prescribing the medication because there's no money in the pot, basically. So I am sure as GPs, these people get into this area of work because they care. So it can't be nice for him to say to me, I know your life's going to go into crisis. I know that you've had these breakdowns, but there's nothing we can do. That can't be a satisfactory position for them. It's certainly not satisfactory for me or anyone around me. Where do we go with this? But I still don't know. I now have the 3 tablets left, and other than paying for it personally, which I'll be able to do for a short amount of time, I don't know where I'm going to go next. They did say that as of the 1st of April, there would be some form of support for people. I personally haven't heard.
You've not been contacted about that? Or?
No. And indeed, when I checked with my psychiatrist, I had not been repatriated back to my psychiatrist. She has not heard at all from my GPs that they're no longer giving me the meds. The first she heard was 3 weeks ago when I told her.
But their prescribing has most definitely stopped.
Most definitely stopped. It stopped as of the 31st of March. So they're not handing us back safely, and I'm sure it's happened to many other people. You've just been left in limbo. Now, that makes me really scared because I don't want to go back to the monster that I used to be. I know I can be better than that. With a little bit of help, I can give so much more back, and it scares me. It scares me that it will affect my friendships, my marriage, my work, where I'm so happy, so supported at work. I'm very involved with support networks. We have about 15 here in Essex for all different areas of life, and I'm on the disability network. I work with them, a wonderful team of people, but I also run the menopause network with my colleague, and I do try and advocate for people who are going through the ADHD channels, because we do need certain adjustments, most of us, and if your supervisors and things don't know about that, how can they be expected to help you and get the best out of you? So it's all about being an upstander and trying to help others to be the best they can be. And some of those people are of quite considerable rank. I'm not just talking about constables, I'm talking about very high up. That doesn't mean to say they're not intelligent or that they're not balanced. It means they're having to work so many times harder to achieve where they've got to.
It's an official medical diagnosis as valid as any other that people may have on their medical records.
that's exactly it, but it's not being recognised as such. And these little small tweaks, some people don't need medication, and life changes and coaching and things like that can help them. But there are other people, unfortunately, like me, who really are better if we do have it. And then we can pay back in, can't we, into society, into community. But if we don't support these people, I worry that I will have another breakdown and that I will lose, myself again. But I think it's quite likely to happen. I'm a lot more aware of myself now, and hopefully people are around me. So, maybe that will stop me spiralling. But I'm not confident, and I'm scared because I don't want to go down that route again. I've got a service. I want to make a difference. I want to help people. I wouldn't have chosen to do this job 27 years ago if I didn't care. And this is one of the things that's really about ADHD and neurodiversity as a whole. We can actually be very, very empathetic. It is a strength of ours in a lot of cases. And I think the only thing that I actually got right really over the years was my work as a family liaison officer. I always worked, usually if you get deployed as a family liaison officer, because someone's lost a loved one. And that could be in an accident or to murder or something like that. And I think that's such an important role to get right. And I remember when I very first started, I went to tell a lady that her husband had died in a car accident. And I went with an older colleague and we knocked the door. And she answered the door, completely unaware of what we were going to tell her. But we had our hats on. My colleague said, "Put your hat on." So as soon as she opened the door, she seemed to recognise that we had our hats on. And my colleague didn't ask if she had anyone with her, did she have any children in the house. And we told her on the doorstep, "There's been an accident, your husband's died, someone will be in contact, leave you with it." And I remember thinking, wow, I will never do that to anyone. And that sort of triggered something in me to want to be a family liaison officer. So I did all the training, and I'd like to think
That you've done
over the years I've done a lot better. So one of the skills I think that a lot of people with ADHD and neurodiversity can be empathy. And that's why they say that a lot of us are attracted to uniform roles, be it army, policing, ambulance, because we quite like structure. And knowing what we've got to do and what's expected of us. And I would say I definitely fall into that category. Sometimes I would fight back against it because I wouldn't think necessarily it was the right thing to do. And I've obviously had to learn, to rein that in. But they also say that we can think outside the box and that we can bring different ways of thinking. And I know certainly when I've worked on really big cases, you have a debrief and it can be very easy to go along one train of thought. And as a detective, especially if someone's lost their life, you need to think a bit wide. You need to leave all channels open until you can definitely close certain doors and that you don't need to go any further down that route. You've got to keep everything open. And problem solving I can be quite good at because I can perhaps see different things might be able to help. They might not be huge, but they might be enough to get the answer that we need. We can bring a lot of different ways of thinking, and sometimes that's really come through with helping cases be solved. It certainly doesn't make us Wonder Cop or anything like that, but it can be a different angle, a different way of thinking, and being able to project that and put it into the team and all the ideas can be really, really helpful. I know when I did my detective role and I was on the serious collision unit, they said I went on there having done 13 years on the traffic department, which I enjoyed, but it was all too much for me. The front line was too much, having the radio on all the time. As I was getting older, I found it was becoming more and more challenging. Having to concentrate on that and concentrate on driving and everything that I was doing was just getting overwhelming. So I had a brilliant chief inspector. He said, "I don't want to lose all your traffic skills and all your family liaison skills. Come and work in the serious collision department," which I really appreciated. And I learned a lot in there and I enjoyed that role. But very quickly it was decided quite rightly that we needed to become detectives because we were dealing with unlawful killings, which is what it is. So I knew, whilst I don't consider myself to be particularly intelligent, I don't think I'm not intelligent. You are intelligent. But I really struggled. I was 47. I haven't done any formal learning, for 30 years since I've been at school. And to try and take on a subject that wasn't necessarily my passion, I found it very, very hard to learn certain sections of the law. I would read a document or a certain section of the law 6 or 7 times, and you could ask me straight away about it and I wouldn't have a clue. It was literally going in one ear and straight out the other because I learned differently. So again, I didn't know I was neurodiverse at that time. I invested my own money in the CDs had CDs then in the cars, and I would listen to them going to and from work. And that is the only way. I failed my detective exam the first time by 1 point. My husband then took me on holiday. He went diving, and we went to Turkey, and I spent the whole week revising by the pool. I did probably about 300 hours extra revision, and I'm being genuine here. And I still only passed by 1 point.
But you passed.
But I passed, and they say I passed, that's great. But for me, it was because I had to learn certain things in a certain way. And being neurodiverse, it's not my way of learning. There was a couple of things I could learn quite well because the instructors would do it in a funny way, in a jokey way, or give examples, real life examples. So those things would sit in my head. I'd be able to
relate to it more,
relate to them and remember it. So certain parts of the law I did really well on. So things like that we need to do a lot of work on. I'm certainly not the best copper or detective in the world, but we can do so much better if we can just do little tweaks.
And you've achieved a great deal, and I think, thank you for talking to us today, because you've shown a few things, including the importance of diagnosis, and not necessarily getting medication, but the awareness, the power, the understanding, and the impact that can have through every area of life.
Yeah.
But also, of course, brought to light the issue that we're facing currently as a population.
Yeah, I just don't know how. I don't know how we're going to solve it. I think it's got to come from government, hasn't it? And of course, within a couple of weeks of me getting my letter, Keir Starmer announced that they're going to look at NHS England, and they're basically what they were saying is the government are controlling certain things, and NHS England are doing other things. And I believe that he's looking at retracting some of the roles they do, or them completely. So maybe that's been brought around, and at the end of the day, the country cannot afford, can it, to have two lots of managers doing one job. We need to be more aware of what we're spending money on. But I don't know how we're going to bring this around. So what I had to do, having been to the GP, I had to, and it was clear that he wasn't going to be able to help me any further. I asked for him to refer me to the right to choose system, which obviously is an extension really of the NHS. The NHS cannot deal with everyone that's getting referred to them. So this is how I understand it. So we have right to choose providers, and there's about 12 of them now, and there's more coming on board all the time, who will act on behalf of the NHS, do our assessments and titration, and take over from the medication from there, because the GPs are no longer doing it. So at the time, I did my research and I went with ADHD care, and they had a waiting list of 2 to 4 weeks, whereas a lot of the other organisations are like up to a year. So I went with them. The GP sent off all I filled the forms in. The GP does a little précis of my mental health history, if you like, and then the forms go off. They come back and ask you some more questions, which you fill out. That's 2 months ago now, so I'm 8 weeks in, and they've been so inundated at the time when I applied as well. I just don't know when. And
that's the concern, isn't it? We know what the original NHS pathway waiting times have been.
And they are still 4 years, I believe, in this area,
yes,
which is a long time to wait.
It is.
And then, so now, hopefully I'll get my right to choose assessment at some stage. It'll be online, which is fine. I feel a bit of a fraud because we know what's wrong with me, and I feel like I'm taking up a space that somebody else, should have.
It's a process that you don't see the value of having to go through.
Yeah, because really, I feel, I went through all the titration and everything, and the assessment, the £3,000. I've paid for all that. I've been taking amphetamine, which is what the drugs are, daily since then. Obviously, if I gave a neurotypical person amphetamine, it would, affect them as if they'd
have a very different outcome.
Very different outcome. But it doesn't affect me like that because I need them because I'm neurodiverse. So we know what I need. It's very simple, but I'm now going to clog up a place in the system which somebody else who might not be diagnosed at all, but I have no choice. I've got to go through that scheme, and then it'll be down to that provider then to provide me with the medication, which ultimately they will be charging the NHS for. But like anything that's outsourced, I'm sure they do it at a special rate, but it's going to cost the NHS more. So it's a knock-on effect, isn't it? Which is taking more money out of the budget. So eventually, hopefully everyone else we'll get our medication to keep us on the straight and narrow eventually. But what's going to happen in the meantime, we're going to be, if I fall over, I might have to call on mental health services. I might have to use A&E, more. my GP more. That is going to use more money out of a system that
It's
is
that
already
disruption
struggling.
in the overall care, isn't it?
It is. And I'm lucky because I've got extra support at home and things like that, and a good place to work.
Not everybody has.
Not everybody's got that. So who's going to look after these people? But also, from a policing point of view, it's not just about police officers and staff that work for Essex Police and Essex Police supporting us, because they will do that and they will do the best they can. But it's about people committing crime. If these people have been diagnosed with a condition like I have and maybe were more affected by it, could that send them into such a state that they start committing crime again? Which means the policing has got to deal with more crime, which affects the public.
I'm sure there will be many deep-rooted repercussions which nobody's thought of as yet.
Exactly. So then we need to be preparing for that in custody suites. Actually, in fairness, there's a lot of work done with neurodiverse people in custodies, and we have fidget toys for them, and they can be given like chalk and blackboard if they want to write notes and write things down. Obviously, there's certain things you can't give people while they're in custody, but there's a lot of work has been done, especially here in Essex, about trying to understand the people that come in with neurodiverse condition, all conditions, but neurodiverse is quite common. What do we need to be doing to help these people survive their time in custody? Because the harder that is, the more resources it takes. It's a vicious circle, but it doesn't seem to me like anyone making the decisions about whether you're going to get meds or not has actually considered this, which I'm sure it's got to affect hospitals, doctors, it's got to affect everything.
I'm sure it will.
Prisons.
Heidi.
You know, they're all going to be affected, and there's going to be people like myself taking more from the system. It doesn't make sense, but we'll see where we go.
We certainly will, and I think there will be many people listening to this podcast that this story resonates with for themselves or for others in their lives. And at the moment there isn't a resolution, if you like, as such, but I would urge anybody not to be alone with this. Please reach out to your local health watch to get some information and support. There's a lot of local charities and organisations that can support moving forward, so please reach out.
I mean, you guys have been absolutely fantastic, and when you said, you know, would you work with us on this, I was just, you know, if I can help anyone, and the fact that you're taking this on and trying to champion and raise awareness for us, for me personally, I need to say thank you. And I'm sure there are hundreds and thousands of people out there all over the UK who want to say thank you to organisations like you, because without you our voice is not going to be heard, and that is scary, and it's our only hope.
It is. People have to be heard, and as I said, we can't offer a resolution, but we're here to listen. This is a really important issue, so thank you so much for taking the time today to share your
It's really
story.
nice talking to you, and thank you for listening. I really appreciate it.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you. So Heidi, just to summarise, we like to end our podcasts by asking our guests, what would be the title of your life story?
Interesting question, isn't it? I think maybe something like If Only I'd Known, or how much better things could have been if I'd known. How much better could I have been if I'd known? Something like that.
I think you've done pretty well anyway, but thank you.
Thanks, Sharon.